Welcome back to Breaking Lines, and this time we're talking about the Euros. It's that time in the 4-year calendar when all of the confederations get to put on their set-piece tournaments, and for the Europeans, for UEFA, it's Euro 2024, so we're off to Germany for the Euros. Gary, are you excited for the tournament?
I am excited, Dave. It's a shame we're not off to Germany, isn't it? Our budget hasn't quite extended to us going live to every game. Maybe next year or next time the tournaments are on.
Once our sponsors come rolling in to fund that tournament.
There you are. We are open last minute. I mean, I'm available if we need to go out. So I suppose, maybe I should have left the door slightly ajar there. I am excited. It's funny when you're in a club, isn't it? When you're working within a club and you've got so much going on. Actually, sometimes those England games you just don't end up as excited as everyone else because you're so deep in thought about the stuff that you're doing yourself. So actually being out of a club and away from a club, it allows you, we haven't had much football for a while, have we? So I think everyone's now, I'm quite looking forward to this tournament and I'm not going to do what everyone else does, which is convince myself that England are going to win yet another tournament, even though we've only won one in our history. So I'm certainly a little bit more pragmatic than most. But it is going to be interesting, going to be exciting. There's a lot of different permutations.
Yeah, that Baddiel and Skinner song when they started off with 30 years and now it's 40 years and now it's like 56 years of hope. Yeah, they certainly thought about that, didn't they? They probably backed themselves that they'll never have to record another single again. But anyway, let's look at England. Yet again, they've had a lovely, easy draw, and they've got the best squad probably in the whole tournament, arguably. But we'll get on to that a little bit later. Kind of breeze through the qualifying group, and they're ready for the tournament. How does this England squad excite you? You've seen it now. Everybody obviously knows who's in it. We had the leaks of people who were coming out of it just before the official squad got named. But what do you look at? What excites you about this England squad?
Yeah, I think it's interesting this time round. I think Gareth's done something that he hasn't done for a while. I think he's had a lot of criticism over the years. Every England manager is going to face, or every national manager is going to face criticism of sorts. So if people are not criticising you about one thing, they're criticising you about another. That's just the nature of the job. When you're in charge, a custodian of that job, that role, the national manager, of course, so important to so many people. I think, over the years, it's always been Gareth favours these players. Gareth's always loyal to these players. They're not particularly playing well at club level, but yet we take them to a tournament. I think that's pretty unfair, but it is something that's been labelled at the national manager. And I think this time round there's a different feel to the squad. There's a different flavour. There feels like himself and Steve Holland and all the relevant people have sat down and said, look, let's be a little bit different. Let's learn from our previous tournaments, and let's try and take people that are in form rather than necessarily the people that we would close our eyes, regardless of what they've done this season, and pick not blindly, but regardlessly. So I think if you look, who would have thought that Wharton would have got in the Euro 24 squad? In fairness to the player, he's very, very fledgling Premier League career. And yeah, he's in the squad. Eze, you wouldn't have thought he would have made the squad. Even someone like Anthony Gordon, I think, would have probably missed out to a Grealish in years gone by. And I know there's an element of injury. You look at Maguire's missed out, but through injury, really, through lack of game time. Grealish and Maddison are the two that really stand out. And actually, Grealish in some ways, because if you put Grealish and Maddison together, you'd say, well, okay, if you look at them both as a bit of a wild card, technically, something a bit different to what we've got at times, then Grealish probably would take the place over Maddison, in my opinion, but both very talented players and both been left out. So there's a different feel, and people are quite excited about that. I think this is the biggest challenge, in my opinion. And I think we have a real core of borderline, some world-class players, some debatably borderline world-class players. Because I'm just putting the level that they're playing at, the ability level that they're playing at, the top of the, you'd have to say the top of the Prem is very close to being world class if you're in that top sort of 2 or 3. You know, you've got to be in that discussion. I think if you look at, you know, Bellingham, I'm sure we're going to come on to in a little while, but Bellingham, Kane, Foden, Stones, Walker, some would argue Pickford. If you look at that, you've got 6 players that could play at the very top level in a very top team, as they've proven, and stand out. My challenge is I don't know how many other players there are that can make the team or the squad that are at that level. And of course, you're not going to have everyone at that level. So I think the challenge is going to be who fills the other pieces, who fills the other spaces. And I think that's going to be the crux of how far England go. But it's going to be very, very, very interesting to watch.
It is real interesting, as you say, when you look at the makeup of the squad and how inexperienced some of the squad are. You know, Miner as well has come in, you know, had a meteoric rise this season. Wharton's had a meteoric rise. Players who've potentially gone into the Championship or even lower down in the EFL and proven that they can handle it. But those young players coming in, they'll probably play with just the freedom of youth, won't they? They've got that no fear kind of complex. So really experienced manager with some really experienced players, but with a great sprinkling of difference and players who are just going to be fearless, probably.
Yeah, I think the ironic thing about the squad is if you look at, this could potentially be Gareth's last tournament and last squad that he picks. The squad looks like it's almost been picked with a view to the next 4 years or the next 8 years. You know, it's a classic one, isn't it? But you know, someone like Wharton, and someone like Eze. You know, I know they've been performing fantastically well, but you know, let's put them in the squad because they deserve it. Let's give them that experience of a big tournament. You wouldn't expect either of those players to play that many minutes. Not that they couldn't, but you wouldn't necessarily expect them to, with the names around them and the players and the experience around them. But I think you have to have those players that are excelling at the top level, don't you? And I think this has been something that we've often struggled with. How many times have you seen it where, you know, we've taken a Rooney who's been injured most of the time and broke down after like 1 or 2 games or something, and you understand why you take these players, or take a Gaza, or take whoever, and it's almost you're taking them what they can do if they're fit, but they're not fit. And so therefore, I think what's happened is Gareth's gone with a very balanced squad. One of the things I think we probably lack is that little ability to open the game at 1v1, sometimes in wider areas, which is going to be interesting to see who he picks, because if you go with the likes of Stacker and Palmer, who inevitably probably the two of the most creative players on form this season, but both a little bit similar, both will drift into similar type of areas. You know, not too many of those players are going to run in behind when Kane is dropping short. So maybe the balance isn't quite right there. But some really interesting decisions. And you know, I think like you said, that inexperience, but actually can be a strength. I read something earlier. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts, Dave. But you know, we have these conversations. People have these conversations, and they'll label a squad. So they'll all say, "Oh, it's a little bit inexperienced," or maybe it's too experienced, but we've won one major trophy in our history. So whichever squad we've picked for the World Cups or the Euros in the last, let's see if my maths are correct,
60 years.
58 years or whatever it is, hasn't quite been right, as it. I don't think it matters what you do. You have to go with what you feel is right as the manager, and you know, you're probably going to get shot down either way.
Yeah, what I always like is when they pick a squad and they say they're picking X amount of players to blood them ready for the next tournament, and then the next tournament comes along, and the players who were blooded in the last tournament are out of form or injured or not at the level anymore, so they're not picked anyway. So you always seem to be projecting your squad for the next tournament. Well, let's just deal with this tournament. You know, we at some stage, whoever's picked him for whatever country has to go out and deliver. And of course, while each nation likes to think that they've got a golden generation, like the one that was in the late 90s, early 2000s for England, when you had like Lampard and Gerrard and Owen and Rooney and all of those, Beckham. But other teams and other countries come up with their golden generation. You just have to run into the wrong team in the wrong year, and that's curtains for you. No matter how good your squad is, if they've got a better one, and maybe one that's also been used to winning tournaments. And certainly England have put a lot of focus in recent years through the youth, winning under 20 tournaments, under 17 World Cups, and so on, to try and get that kind of winning feeling in tournaments, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think, look, if you look at some of that success early, and undoubtedly some of those players have got used to that success a little bit, got used to it. You have to also look at, the last Euros we got to the final. The World Cup, the quarter-final wasn't quite as good, but previous to that, the semi-final. So I would say actually, Gareth Southgate, I know Gareth reasonably well to chat to, and I remember speaking to him at St. George's Park not that long ago, and I actually posed the question: how do you, as England manager, bridge this gap of everybody thinks a lot of the continental managers, the foreign managers, so much tactically better prepared, whereas actually, if you look at England, in fairness, they've reached a really consistent level. Yes, you can argue the squad's excellent, but I think Gareth and Steve Holland and all of his staff, I think they've done an excellent job. The consistency level, the atmosphere created, the players coming through, obviously not of course them, but the way they've been coached and monitored at the clubs and developed. I think the biggest challenge England face, and I think this will bring us on to a Bellingham. The biggest question for me has always been, Italy just seem to have that ability to win big games. Germany just seems to have that ability to win big games. Spain the same. Portugal have showed it. Some of the other, France have shown it in abundance. And I think on the world, of course we're on the European stage, but that always feels like something as a manager, I'm not sure you can always give that. I think the top players seem to guide their teams through it in the big moments, and we're talking about the top 0.00001% or whatever it might be of players that seem to be able to handle the moments in the big games. It's difficult to find that, isn't it, as a manager?
Absolutely. And in terms of big players and big performances, the one thing that at least you will look at England now is they've got a big game player, even though he's really young, like going and performing in the Champions League final like he did, and the meteoric rise of Bellingham. We've mentioned him before, but that's been some journey, hasn't it? And he's probably the truly world-class player, probably even above Kane in the squad now. There's probably no team on earth that would not want to have Bellingham in their team. So you've seen him from when he was small, like when he was at Birmingham starting off. Was it the indication back then of this behemoth of a player that he was going to become?
Yeah, quite incredible, really. And I think what I would say is, obviously, I only seen a very small part of that early development, and but also speaking to people around the club at the time. Of course, we were at Birmingham. I know the academy director very well, who was there at the time, Christian Speakman, who has played an integral part, I think, in that development and helping and shaping some of that development. Of course, along with the coaches and obviously his parents have played a massive part. He's now obviously director of football at Sunderland. But at the time, I mean, Jude was around 13, 14. I think his brother was a year younger. I think, I'm not sure, a year younger or a year older, I'm not sure, but both two very close in age. And they were both fantastic players. In fairness, Jude, I think, was the one they felt was always just going to develop quicker to a higher level straight away. But I think they had both big hopes for both players. So amazing at that age how you can see that. It always fascinates me how you can see how good a player is going to be, because as the manager at the time, they'd say, look, we need to keep this player at the club, because of course that's the only way you're going to keep them there, is by treating them well and hoping that they can see the club as a pathway, because you can't sign them to long contracts at that age. So they used to bring Jude down, Joe down, his parents down to the office on a match day sometimes. Would have a chat. They'd have that close contact with a manager. Of course, it would make them feel good in the process. And have a really good conversation with them. Both two young lads just coming down, like talking to any other 13, 14-year-old. And then I remember being asked to put a training session on for an hour with about 12 players, but I think specifically with Jude in mind, which not many clubs, not many managers would do, but that was how important it was. I remember in technical board meetings, Dave, discussing Jude Bellingham and how we need to try to help shape the development. And I think all of this circles back really to how special he was at that age. And I remember Christian saying to me, this kid is the most sought after 13-year-old in Europe. He has had every single big club throughout Europe watching the academy games, and they would all take him in a heartbeat. And I'd say to really, how good do you think he can be? Because how would you tell at that age? I'd been in youth football for a while, and how do you tell? And he said to me, he will be England captain. That's how good he is. He's a Rolls Royce, even at that age. So fair play to those people that shaped those early years, helped shape those early years. I think you also have to factor in his parents have made some incredibly good decisions for parents to make, because there'd be a lot of parents at that age making the decisions that maybe helped the family money-wise, maybe got the kid to a higher level quicker. But I think they've had a pathway that they've been cognizant of all the way through that gets him to the top level. Of course, you have to have an incredible player with incredible talent and mentality. But to go to Dortmund and take that step that they felt would be right, to go to a club that would give a young player lots and lots of game time at that age and develop, and then go to Real Madrid, of course, and play the part that he's played so far. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't claim to have played any part in his development, but I've certainly seen it close up at that age, at a young, tender age, how much people rated him. And it's been really interesting to see him develop further.
The one thing that's never mentioned about Bellingham, well, as far as I can see or I've read, is the fact that Bellingham hasn't played in the Premier League. He's not produced by the Premier League. He's someone who's gone from the Championship to the Bundesliga to La Liga. He's learning on the international stage as opposed to playing in England with a lot of other English players all the time. Maybe his breakthrough has come because he's actually broke the shackles and gone outside of the English game. Do you think that's a fair comment, or is that just the nature of the beast? He was picked up early and he's chosen a different path?
No, do you know what, Dad? I think that's a great observation. I think if you look at that pathway, and that's what I'm saying. I think with his parents, and of course, I'm sure speaking to people in the game, they felt that the pathway had to be right for him, and if they could choose the right pathway, regardless of finances. This is my observation from outside. I don't know this.
Yeah,
what it looks like. But I think they've really thought about the player's career more than the player's wealth. Because of course one thing leads to another with a young player anyway. If you play and you develop in the right way and you've got that talent and ability, the rest inevitably just follows. And I think you're right. And maybe that's why. Maybe in some ways that's why he's at the level he is at the moment. And like you're saying, he's almost a player. I mean, look, we shouldn't, but we are putting a lot of England's success onto his shoulders at a tender age, because all of and maybe this is what I'm coming back to earlier, this big game mentality, this ability to handle the big moments. Maybe that's something that's part of the coaching. I don't want to. I don't want to be disparaging to young English coaches, because I don't think that's fair. I think we've got some of the best coaches coming through, and I think we have coaches at levels that can match other nations. However, I do think they coach a slightly different way in a Germany or wherever that is. And so Jude being part of that and experience that coaching and that mentality, maybe that's why he's at this level at such a young age where he looks like he can handle the games. There's been a few question marks at the top level, the Champions League final. Did he impact it as much as people would think? But to me, that's part of a young player. You're not going to impact it as much as a Tony Kroos, who's played in these games over and over again. But you know what? Give him another 5, 6, 7 years, and I'm sure you'll see that impact getting bigger and bigger and bigger in those games.
Yeah, it's frightening to think, what is he going to be like in 6 years? Like, at 20 now, he's already bossing the midfields all around Europe. And he goes into this tournament as part of, a England team that's got a genuine chance of potentially winning it, haven't they? You have to be honest, with the players that they've got available to them, with the group that they've got to start with, and we come on to the group shortly, with the top players that they've got, Kane, Foden, Stones, you've got Walker, Pickford. Like, Pickford's obviously someone that you've worked with Pickford. Like, he's another player who's, stood the test of time. He's had plenty of critics in the past, but he's come through and he's a top goalkeeper, isn't he?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I remember signing him at Burton Albion. So not many England internationals have come through, but worn a Burton Albion shirt. But yeah, quite a funny story actually. I would probably say the best value, or one of the best value signings I've ever made, and the chairman reminds me of it a few times. So Nicky Law rang me. It's quite funny actually, because Nicky Law rang me. He was the manager of Alfreton, and Jordan Pickford had played for Alfreton part of the previous season. I think for the sort of back end of the season.
On loan, or was just playing for Alfreton?
No, on loan. He was at Sunderland at the time.
Right, okay, yeah.
And Nicky Law rang me. I was on holiday at the time. He said, "Do you need a goalkeeper?" I said, "Well, not really, but, we might be looking for one." He said, "Honestly, I've had this kid on loan." And one of his reasons, I won't say all of his reasons, but he said, honestly, he can kick it from one end of the pitch to another and go out of play. I was like, oh, wow, brilliant. Is it going where he wants it to go? Up in the back. Of course, at that level, there probably wasn't much playing out from the back at that time. But I think he was talking about his accuracy and the length of his kick and the speed of his distribution. And anyway, so I had a little look at him. And then Dave Manassi rang me about him. Dave Manassi was his agent at the time. I had a good relationship with Dave. And Dave said, look, just give him an opportunity. This kid's going to be top draw. Give him an opportunity. I said, well, we can't. I did the old classic where we haven't got much to pay Dave. He said, just pay what you can. He said, I'll make it happen, because, of course, he's a pretty powerful agent. So I said, look, we probably only, I don't know what we've got. He said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, could you play 500 quid? I said, yeah, probably. He said, right, pay 500 quid a week if he doesn't play. He said, and I'll get you in for free if he plays. So he only had to start for him to be a free player. So, of course, I told my chairman, and Ben Robinson, literally jumped out of his seat. Said, where can we sign? Where can we sign? I said, I want to look at him. But the value at that level at the time was so important. So I think we had him for, half a season. I don't think he stayed for the whole season. I think you had him for half a season. And he was incredible. We played a cup game against Sheffield United, and I think he's caught across about 16 yards out from his goal. Literally, he was so aggressive with the way he'd come out for things. And he's hit a sidewinder as quick as you like, and it's gone about 60 metres, landed over the fullback's head, an inch perfect into the winger's path. And at that point, you were like, wow. Look, he made mistakes at that age. He was only, I think, 19. But you could see what, you could see the attributes of being a top goalkeeper, his mentality as well. So I'm pleased he's gone on to do well. And that's just a little anecdote for Burton Albion's many international footballers that they've had.
Yeah, did you have to run that through the data insights department at Burton, to make sure all of his metrics were, on spot? Or was it literally just, let's go?
Let's go. One metric was required, and that was he's free if he plays. Let's take a gamble. So yeah,
An important metric in the lower leagues, as we know, which is, what's the cost of this going to be, so
absolutely.
excellent. Well, you know what, we'll see how England get on, obviously, once they start in the tournament. I'm sure we'll come back to it because we've got a few shows planned to reflect on the Euros. So yeah, they'll kick off. We'll see how Bellingham, Pickford and co go. Let's have a look quickly at the groups. So we start with Group A, right? So I like the look of this group. It's got plenty of variety in it. We've got Germany, Scotland, Hungary, and Switzerland.
Wow, that is a tough group, isn't it? If you're Scotland, I think Scotland are actually, you wouldn't think they are necessarily, but they're actually the lowest ranked in that group. I think they have a chance of getting out of it, though. I would say. I think playing Germany first as the host nation. I mean, what a first game to be involved in if you're Scotland, and I think
didn't they start like the 2098? What was it, 98 World Cup or somewhere? Didn't they start against France or something, or Brazil? They had to open the tournament before. Scotland.
Your memory will be far better than mine if you could remember that. But I think it's a great opening game for them because there'll be so much expectation on Germany. There'll be no expectation on Scotland. It might be one of those type of games where, if you can frustrate them a little bit. We spoke about Germany previously, didn't we? That they've had a poor run of form previous to this Nagelsmann coming in, haven't they? They've had a really, really poor last tournament. But as the host nation, of course, there's a lot of expectation on them, and they've got some good young new players coming through as well. But I think for Scotland, I think the biggest issue Scotland have, and Steve Clarke has really, is not necessarily their form. I think they've won 1 in 9 coming into this tournament. But they actually were excellent in qualification, but it's their injuries. If you look at their injuries, McTominay's not featured very much recently. Lewis Ferguson's out. He's had an absolute stellar period in Italy. It's been absolutely fantastic. Aaron Hickey's been out. Lyndon Dykes has been out. I messaged him yesterday, actually, Lyndon. I know him reasonably well, and he's been devastated that he's been out the tournament. But I think, he said he's finally got over it, I think, mentally, and now he's ready to hopefully help the rest of the squad out. So I think he's staying out with the squad. So,
oh wow, okay, that's good, isn't it? Help with that kind of continuity and the culture around the squad. You need important players like that and experienced players like that around the squad.
And I think it shows his character and his value to the squad because he's been a bit of a talisman for them, really, in the way that they play. So, but I think they've got some good players. Elisa McGinn playing at a fantastic level. In a European qualifying team in Aston Villa. And they've got some very good players, like Shay Adams, who, of course, we've worked with at Birmingham. Signed him for Sheffield. So they've got some very good players to step into that void. But it's going to be tough for them. I think it's going to be difficult. But I think trying to get out of this group, is a viable prospect. I mean, Switzerland are a good side. Hungary are a good side. Another one of our former players in Callum Styles, but I think Scotland, at their best, as they were in qualification, they need to get that form back. I think can qualify, certainly. And then anything can happen after that. So it's going to be really interesting. But you'd have to say quite a tough group for them to be drawn in.
Yeah, Switzerland are always that team in any group that they've ever been in. Euros, World Cup. They just find ways of winning games and getting there and being, that kind of team that everyone expects or country that everyone expects, we'll probably beat Switzerland. And then you see the names on the team sheet and you go, there's a reason why Switzerland have been so successful, generally speaking, over the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could say the same recently about Hungary. I mean, I haven't seen their recent results, but, certainly beating England in recent years.
Lost to Ireland a couple of games ago, but then, responded with a win at the weekend or yesterday, I think it was. Yeah, 2-1 win.
Yeah, there you go. So I think a lot of these countries, have good team structures, have good coaching. Good sort of technical managers coaching the teams, and I think they can always create problems for any team. Like you say, maybe they'll be looking at the likes of Germany, saying there'll be a lot of expectation on Germany, but their recent years wouldn't dictate them to be the favourites. I think, bizarrely, really, I think statistically England are the favourites, with France just behind and Germany probably not too far behind that. I think that's ridiculous, to be honest with you. I think you'd always have to go with the nations that have won big tournaments and showed the ability to win big tournaments. It doesn't mean to say that England can't do that and haven't shown but promised. But so I think there's going to be pressure on Germany. But certainly the likes of Switzerland, Hungary, and Scotland in that group can cause problems.
Well, certainly Hansi Flick hasn't looked back since the disastrous Qatar tournament, has he? Because he's just nicked himself the Barcelona job. So well done, Hansi. Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Dave, get us on Netflix is all I'm saying. Like, I would happily humiliate myself on Netflix. I can do one of those. I can do one of those angry team talks, definitely.
Well, Hansi doesn't have a podcast as far as I know, but who knows? This can be our Netflix anyway. So that's Group A. We've done Group A. Obviously, we're Scotland well in that one. Group B's got Spain, Croatia, Italy, and Albania.
Group of death. I think that's the group of death, isn't it? You always look at one group of death. If you're a perceived top nation, you don't want to be drawn against one or two top nations. And the fact that you've got, did you say Spain, Croatia, and Italy?
Yes.
Who were the other team?
And Albania.
So actually, Albania, I don't think Albania are in bad form either. But
classic banana skin there, isn't it, for the other three? Just looking at Albania, probably a little bit like Switzerland in the previous group.
Yeah, but you wouldn't expect Albania to topple three of those teams and get out of the group, would you? Wouldn't expect it, but that's going to be
whether they take points off one of the teams and might think that they can get out of it, because that's what tournament football is all about. You just take one bad result and it's all gone.
But if you look at that, you've got Spain, who you would expect to be very, very strong. You've got Croatia that have done really, really well in tournaments over the previous 20 years. And you would expect them to qualify, or in some ways to qualify. But you've got Italy, the previous winners, that again, you would expect to be pretty strong. I mean, interesting, it's a real shame that Roberto Mancini isn't still the manager of Italy, because we might have had an outside chance of getting him on this podcast, having been a former teammate of mine. Quick funny story about Roberto Mancini. When he came to Leicester, I remember him sitting down on the coach on the way to an away game, and I think it was prior to the game. He would sit, classic Italian style. He'd even make the team tracksuit look stylish. I don't know how he'd do that, but he'd make everything look stylish, and he'd be sat there with a block of Parmesan and some Parma ham and a fork, and just breaking bits off, and you're thinking, God, how can I be like this guy? And then you'd have one of the other Leicester players on the other table with a massive, I'm blaming you guys for this. One of the sports signs at some point would have said, jelly babies or wine gums are actually okay prior to a game. And I'm saying, but surely eating a whole pack 2 hours before kickoff isn't quite the nutritional advice that you intended to give to a player. So that's what some of the players would do. And Roberto would sit there and almost look down his nose at these sweets and players, these average players eating sweets. And you could see him thinking, what are these things? And someone said to him, it's a sweet. It's a white. He went, never had a sweet. I don't know whether he was bantering play, but I can imagine with the physique he had and the career he had, he probably hadn't ever had a sweet. Anyway, fast forward 4 or 5 games, you know what's coming, don't you? Even Roberto Mancini's inner child got the better of him, and at this point he's probably thinking, I might have to just try one. So he's tried one. That guy never looked back. I think he got addicted to wine gums.
The beginning of the end of his career was wine gums on the Leicester City team bus.
Honestly, I think I read an article after that at Man City, when he was manager, he was getting things out of his pocket and eating them mid-game. And I don't think they were chewing gums. And I think he said when he came to England, he got addicted to wine gums or something like that. I might have got that slightly wrong, but yeah. So how the Leicester team bus and the squad corrupted one of the finest Italian specimens in football ever known to man would be a good story that I've got.
Yeah, so. To be fair, considering that Leicester squad, I think he got away lightly with just jelly babies and wine gums, to be fair.
That's a very, very good point, Dave. Well, mate. That might be another podcast. But yeah, if Roberto, if you're listening, if you could confirm to Breaking Lines podcast whether that story was true or not, that would be fantastic and tag us into your many Italian followers.
Excellent. Well, listen, it's Spain-Croatia to kick off, so that's a big game to start us off. Recent good form in tournaments from both of those teams, and obviously Spain have got a pedigree of winning big tournaments, World Cups and Euros, haven't they? And Croatia have been thereabouts in recent times as well. So what a game to kick off that group. On to Group C, England's group, Slovenia, Denmark, Serbia, England. Is there an easier group ever drawn, ever, in any tournament, in any sport, if you're England?
Is that the inner Irishman coming out there, Dave? You suggesting that's what happened, Dave? That's what happens when you've invented the game and you're one of the top seeds. You do what you want, mate. You know, we just pick our own group and probably still don't qualify. That's the irony of it all.
Well, let's see. Obviously, England are tournament favourites. They're expected to top this group. Who comes out with them?
Yeah, I agree with your ironic comments about the group, and England do seem to have very. When you look at that Spain group, you would say that England do seem to get some. I won't say privileged draws, but seem to get some pretty good draws. Yeah, that's difficult really because I think Serbia pretty strong. Denmark are very, very competitively strong. And I think both of those teams could give us problems. And I think it's a real toss-up to say which one comes out of that group. For me, I'd probably go with Denmark, actually. Okay. Maybe getting out of the group with England. And that's not being harsh to Slovenia, but I think that probably out of all those teams, Slovenia would be the one I'd least expect to qualify. But someone else who's a Slovenian football expert may be able to tell me something that I don't know,
Well, maybe we'll ask Timmy Elsnick, who was coming through at Derby while we were there in the under-21s, a good, robust midfielder. Timmy Elsnick versus Jude Bellingham. Watch that one go off.
There you go. If you're listening, Timmy, come on the podcast. Let us know how your Slovenian squad's shaping up, and fair play to him, because at the time he was a player that probably wouldn't have featured that often for Derby's first team. So to go and carve a career elsewhere, I think is fantastic. And should be applauded. So international football, tournament football, well done to Timmy Elsnick.
Yeah. So we'll leave that. That's Group C, the easiest group. Whatever the opposite is to the group of death, that's it. It's Group C.
Group of comfort.
Group of comfort. Yeah.
Dave. Yeah.
Group D, Netherlands, France, Poland, Austria.
Wow. That's pretty close to rivaling the Spanish group, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough group.
I'm kicking off with Netherlands, France, first game.
So was that Netherlands, France,
Poland, Austria?
Well, if you look at the Netherlands and Austria, for example, both won 5 out of 6 of the last games. So both go in fantastic form. Yep. I think Holland definitely are one of those teams. I look at their squad and I can see them doing really, really well. I think they're a very, very talented team. I think they have some real physicality alongside that technicality, and I think they they could well be very strong. Of course, Poland are going to be carried along to a certain degree by a certain aging forward in Lewandowski, but they've got some other very, very good players as well, and like you say, the international football's so interesting, isn't it? Because if you look at all of these squads, all of the teams are playing all the players are playing at incredibly high levels. You look at Austria's team, they've got some absolutely, class players playing at high levels, notably a lot of them in the Bundesliga, playing for big clubs, So I think if you look at some of these teams in some of these groups, I think the quality of international football is getting better and better for some of the teams that maybe were seen as smaller nations, smaller teams. I think the gap is getting a little bit closer. And I think that's the exciting bit about this tournament. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how some of these teams, and I think we're going to see quite a lot of upsets.
Yeah, sorry, I got that. Match day first is Poland against the Netherlands, and it's Austria, France, rather than what I said, which was Netherlands, France. So anyway, that's a horrible group. I wouldn't like to have to pick who I think will get out of it, but I'm going to say Netherlands and France get out of it. So yeah, that's who I'm going for there. I think Poland just won't have enough, and Austria, unfortunately for you, Andy Weimann, another former player of ours, but he's in the Austria squad. You just can't see them being able to overturn certainly two of the other three. They'll probably potentially get a draw or win in one of the games, but you just can't see Austria getting out of that group. Anyway.
I think they've got Mike. Is it Arnautovic as well with Andy Weimann up front?
Yeah,
I got that wrong, but Andy Weimann, I'm going to be cheering for Andy Weimann. One of our former players. Great lad. What a guy.
Top character.
Really good footballer. Loads of energy. I think he comes from a family of athletes. I think his mum and dad were...
What explains that then? Yeah.
They were athletes, national athletes for Austria, I believe. And I'm going for Andy Weimann, Golden Boot winner. Please, come on, Andy.
Andy Weimann for the Golden Boot, right? That is the shock sensation of this podcast, right? We're getting that one.
I'm hoping. I'm not saying it's realistic. I'm desperately hoping that's
hoping.
Yeah. So.
Hey, we had some Golden Boots, while we were at Derby, weren't we? Vidra won the Golden Boot. Unfortunately, he's not made it into the Czech squad this time. But let's look at Group E. Ukraine, Slovakia, Belgium, Romania.
Well, you got to say Belgium surely have a fairly easy passage for the next round. I'm not saying that those teams can't compete against each other, but you would think that Belgium, with the squad that they've got, with the quality that they've got, would certainly be able to get through. I was reading a little bit about Tedeschi. Tedesco was a manager. Really interesting character. Managed at a very, very high level, and actually took a international job at a very young age. I think 30. I might get some of my research wrong, but I think 37 when he took the job, which is unusual for someone to take an international job at a young age. Again, like Nagelsmann, a very young coach at international level. So be interesting to see how they do. Of course, they've had a real golden era, Belgian football. Are they just sort of coming out of that a little bit, or with the likes of Doku coming through, can they maintain that quality and an expectation? Because they certainly are a contender in any tournament, I would say.
Yeah, well, Belgium obviously is a former FIFA ranked number one team in the world, and they've got some unbelievable players available to them. You think it's just going to be too much of a challenge for the other teams to top the group. However, it's tournament football. We've seen it plenty of times before where form goes out the window, to use that old cliche, and it's all about how you perform on the day. And they're certainly going to be the ones with the target on their back, Belgium, in that group. probably a little bit of a bun fight between the other three to get into second place. But that's the great thing about sometimes more competitive groups, aren't there? Whereas there's less almost between some of the teams, but you would expect Ukraine and Belgium certainly to be pushing for those top two. And somebody else we had. Henrik Ravas, a goalkeeper who's made it into the Slovakian team. Henrik has been playing around Europe for a number of years, went to the MLS at the start of this year, and has nicked himself a place in the Slovakian squad. So well done, Henrik.
Well done, Henrik. Yeah, I mean, two really good lads in Henrik and Timmy Elsley. Really nice characters. And the only thing I could... Will he obviously he'll want to play, but in that group, difficult group, not just saying that, like you said, quite competitive, but, would you want to be in goal against Belgium? That could be a lot of action if he makes that starting lineup. I don't think he's expected to, but yeah, no, again, great effort to get into that squad and an amazing experience. You look at it again, don't you, for some of these players that, I never experienced it as a player. I would have taken being someone, who made a squad. Okay, if you don't play, but what an incredible experience to be part of a squad and part of a team. And, to take that into your future career, whether that be coaching, management, whatever it is, that experience would be absolutely invaluable. And of course, you never know what happens. You might end up through injury, through misfortune, ending up playing some games, and it could make a big difference to your career. So good luck to some of those players that we work with, and let's hope they have really positive tournaments.
Yeah, well, the tournaments are there to uncover some of the bright young talent that maybe hasn't yet broken through, and they get the opportunity in a game, and suddenly their life changes, doesn't it? We've seen plenty of players do that in the past, but certainly if we go on to the last group, Group F, we got one of the oldest players in the tournament in Ronaldo playing for Portugal. They've got the Czech Republic or Czechia, Georgia and Turkey. It's a real intriguing group, this one, I think.
It is. And actually, if Ronaldo was the oldest Portuguese player, and I'd give him massive, massive credit, but he's not. There's Pepe still in the squad at 41, which is absolutely...
People in the 40s can still play. I've got it.
I mean, I played a charity game a few weeks ago, and I said to you, I've hardly been able to walk since. I mean, so to play at that level regularly, I mean, I am nearly 10 years older than that, but for Ronaldo to be playing and being the top scorer in his respective league, out in Saudi Arabia, and Pepe to still be playing for Porto at 41 years old, I mean, is testament to their professionalism. Absolutely. Or, whatever the diet and something in the water is in their respective parts of Portugal or Madeira, wherever that might be, for Ronaldo's case, I want some of that. So, yeah, no, tough. It's quite an even group, isn't it? Like you say, you'd expect Portugal to get out of it. But the other three teams, what were the other three teams against Georgia?
You've got the Czech Republic. You've got Turkey. So they're the four teams: Portugal, Czech, Georgia, and Turkey. And Turkey have a history, haven't they? Georgia aren't going to roll over for anybody in this tournament. So you would expect that this is again going to be a competitive group.
Yeah, and I would imagine pretty close nations. I would imagine Turkey would have a big following as well in Germany. So yeah, I think that's a really competitive group. Again, you'd expect Portugal to get out of it, but I think this is what makes a tournament so intriguing, Dave, isn't it? But it's not just about these top teams. Some of these other teams are going to create some brilliant headlines. Are going to create some great stories. There's going to be someone who ends up qualifying in front of a really big nation full of expectation. I think that's what's so fascinating about this tournament, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing, and to watching, and actually, it's probably one of I'm most excited about this tournament more so than probably any other tournament in recent years, So yeah, absolutely can't wait, and we'll be both following on some of these groups with glee, won't we? I think, the one thing I'm most looking forward to, and I would have put the Irish fans certainly into this bracket of the way to conduct yourself as a fan base in a major tournament. And I think we can learn, as English fans, we certainly can learn an awful lot. But the Scottish fans we're going to see, and we've already seen, going out there and just having great fun, creating this dynamic that, brilliant interactions with local people, going there and creating a party type atmosphere. Of course they're going to want to win games and follow their teams, but doing it in the right, I really hope that a lot of other fan bases, including our, England's, really take note. And of course, I'm talking about a small minority of any fan base that might cause some trouble. But Scottish fans seem to go there with such a brilliant mentality and such a brilliant attitude. And I think, that is going to be something I'm going to look forward to watching also.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. Scotland fans, Irish fans, and in recent years, the Welsh fans, they've all had their kind of cycle of going to tournaments, haven't they? Like Ireland in the 90s when they were getting to the World Cup and they would go in and take over a tournament and it would turn into a party, So whether it was the Green Army that Jack Charlton had, or it's the kind of bucket hat brigade that Rob Page had when he was going with Wales, who obviously missed out in this tournament, or it's the Tartan Army and they're going to go and boogie around Germany for the whole tournament, with their great catchy song that they've got going as well. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about the fans. It's about going to the fan parks and having good fun and interacting with other people across Europe and bringing football together to go and enjoy yourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, for all the negativity that Qatar got, the fact that there was no alcohol there, and obviously I wasn't out there, so I couldn't understand the implication or the impact of that, or how easy or how difficult it was to get hold of an alcoholic drink. But I presume no alcohol, certainly in the stadiums, like made for zero trouble, zero problems. There seemed to, okay, you can argue, does that take a little bit away from some of the atmosphere, but you give me an insight, Dave. Why is that? Why do the Irish and the Scottish fans? And again, I'm generalising. I'm not suggesting that. I think there's a vast majority of England fans and fans of a lot of the other nations that go there and conduct themselves in a brilliant way. But the Irish and the Scottish and the Welsh just seem to be everybody's going there for those reasons. Why is that? Give us an insight.
I think in the first instance, we don't get there that often. So when we do get there, let's go and enjoy it. Let's go and enjoy the tournament, going to a different place, going to a different culture, interacting with all the people there. It's certainly been always a challenge for the England fans, hasn't it, when they've had to go abroad, because maybe they've at times unfairly been singled out as a group of supporters where, the minority, the tiny minority who cause trouble, affect what is the observation of the whole of that fan base. And that's not fair really on the England fans, but certainly for the Irish fans, Welsh fans, Scottish fans, I think we like to go have a party, enjoy the football, but more than that, enjoy the tournament around that, So, I think in the old kind of rugby days, win or lose, they're on the booze. Maybe that didn't happen in Qatar, but it can certainly happen in the beer halls and in the steins flowing out in Germany in a few days' time.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun, and even seeing those opening scenes of John McGinn. Dad, do you know what I think? I think maybe I could say that me and you might be a better dancer than John McGinn. Definitely not better footballers. Might well challenge him certainly in the dancing stakes, but you know what?
I think anyone needs to see my dancing. That's just
no, that's probably a good. I think also shows how Scotland are approaching it. They're trying to get that synergy with the fans. They're trying to have that relationship, build that relationship with the Tartan Army, so that when the games start, that adds that extra importance. Look, the England fans will do that absolutely as well, So, but it has been fun to watch as well, hasn't it? Take the technical side away, take the tactical side away. Watching the fans interact has also been a very, very short highlight so far. Let's look forward to seeing a little bit more of it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the teams approach the whole tournament, isn't it? Like, for example, England have gone to a really, really remote town away from everyone to base their camp. Other countries have gone for something that's a little bit more around where the action is, So do you decide that it's going to be an uber professional? Probably if you're England, you're expected to win it. You got to go and treat it as professionally as you can. Whereas other countries, go and enjoy the tournament. Our expectation is not to win, it's to go, participate, compete, but let's enjoy it while we're there.
Yeah, and I've found the perfect job, Dave, and you will empathise with this, and I think you might be applying for this if it comes up in the future. I think you're far too skilled for this, and your CV's a lot better. But apparently, the guy who went out to recce from the English FA went out to recce the hotels. That was his 30th, or went to see 33 different hotels within that process. I mean, that is. I'm saying, I'm challenging whether they were actually all in Germany, or maybe let's look at 2 hours flight away in Ibiza or somewhere, just in case that might be a good base. But you'd have to say that's a pretty plum job, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, you need a good week to take in the ambiance and, walk the grounds, make sure the local town and the hosteleries around there are all like adequate for what you need. We've been to Germany on pre-season tours. We stayed at one of the romantic hotels in Germany. Now, I want to really know whether he went to that hotel with its windmill, lack of Wi-Fi, and 1970s decor.
I think he quickly ruled that one out of the process. I would imagine if it was one of the 33, I'd be surprised. But that's the challenge, isn't it? What do you want? You've seen this cycle with England and other nations picking that hotel. And of course, you've got lots of other teams trying to pick their hotel. So someone might well be more feasibly planned ahead or have planned ahead better than you and nicked that hotel and managed to get that booking in early. So I'd imagine there's a limit of really good hotels depending on what you want. But what I would say is, we've seen this difference, haven't we? Do you want a hotel that's close to things so the players don't get bored? Do you care whether the players get bored? This is an international major tournament. Boredom shouldn't be a factor, should it? Like, if you're going to be an England player bored and use that as an excuse for not performing well, like, who cares? If you're an Italian player, they won't care. They'll just lock their players up for 6 weeks, and that's the expectation, or the German nation will be exactly the same with their team. But you might have a preference, Do you want leisure facilities? Of course, you can bring all of those in. You want good pitch quality first and foremost, don't you? You want location not too far to travel from your group games. And of course, I would imagine England, or let's pick England as an example. I would imagine they'll have another location depending on where the next stages are. They'll have a secondary, third plan, fourth plan, depending on where they need to go to then. Or they might stay in the same hotel, I don't know. But certainly as a base, it depends what you're looking for. Because, like you say, you get somewhere that's got, every hotel surely has decent Wi-Fi. That's what we thought before we turned up to that one. But that would be a major factor, wouldn't it? The players have got a lot of downtime, communicating and spending time with their family on WhatsApp or whatever.
FaceTime or whatever they're doing.
Or FaceTime or whatever they're using. You need to be able to do that in order to be able to stay in connection. Do the families go out there? That's something that the players did in previous tournaments. Families would go out there with them. To me, in some ways, that's a big thing. But is that a distraction? From a major tournament? Is that just something that's nice to have, but actually you're here to win the tournament? So that might be very different from someone who's there to take part and see how far they can get.
Yeah, I remember we went to to Holland with Norwich. We used to go there for pre-season practically every year. So one of the places that we stayed was the base for Portugal during Euro 2000. So this is about 2001, 2002 that we were staying at this hotel, and they were telling us about some of the goings on while Portugal were there. And I think it was a Portugal that had Figo and Co in the team. And seemingly the the lads were getting bored with being, stuck around in this remote part of Holland. So they wanted to go and, get out of the kind of the hotel area. So by all accounts, and somebody might have to corroborate this, they ordered in 3 helicopters, and the players took the helicopters to disappear off. Don't know what direction they went or where they went. Obviously, team management found out, because you can't really hide helicopters, can you? They're kind of noisy. And where's all the lads? Oh, they disappeared in the helicopters. So they banned the players using helicopters. So I think a week later, like 12 supercars arrived, and they went to Paris in supercars, because why not? It's the tournament. We're bored at the hotel. Like this. Back then, of course, there wasn't really Wi-Fi, was there? Hadn't been invented. Kids hadn't been invented. But
so you've got helicopters. I'm imagining helicopters or supercars turning up at either Papendal or the Golden Tulip.
Deerlow, somewhere like that. Yeah.
Because I've done a recce of about 5 or 6 places over there. One year I went there. Me and my wife drove from Germany through to Amsterdam, and actually did about 4 or 5 looking for pre-season locations. So I can only imagine the furore that would have caused locally. So of course these players, it's hard to get bored when you have the capability of doing something like that, isn't it? So I'm pretty sure you can buy in whatever you want. And if you haven't thought about it as a staff, the players probably will think about it, won't they?
One thing we haven't mentioned, and it's a joy to look out for now, is all the social media time that the teams have to fill with funny things that they're doing while on camp. Quizzes and get to know people. And here's the lads on inflatable unicorns in the pool doing a recovery session. I'm really looking forward to that stuff. It's quality material, quality content.
I can only imagine they're going to replicate some of that stuff. Punching a punch bag while answering questions.
That kind of stuff, yeah. Hey, maybe we'll do a best of. Who did it best over the tournament? Let's forget about the football. Let's look at the social media content, because content wins. Content is king. And on that note, putting you on the spot, who are you going for?
Oh,
I'll take England out of it. Okay, we'll take England out of it, because you're obviously going to be biased.
Yeah. Do you know what? I can't look too far past Germany.
Just Germany, right?
Because of the home nation, just because they've been so poor previously. I think Nagelsmann, fantastic coach. Of course, we played against Hoffenheim when he was manager there pre-season. Some of the things he was doing tactically were so difficult to negate and so difficult to work out quickly. I think he's excellent, and I'm gonna go for. If I had to pick one, I think I'm going to go for Germany.
Outsider? Have you got an outsider?
Outsider. Hard to pick an outsider. I'm just looking down at some of the notes I made. You couldn't class Holland as an outsider, could you? But if I could class Holland as an outsider, then I would go for Holland as my second, or as my outside bet. What about you? Who are you going for?
Yeah, well, obviously I can't go for Ireland, obviously, because we don't make tournaments anymore and haven't done for about 20 years. So, yeah, I'm going to go, strange enough.
You only made them when you had all the English players playing for them, Dave.
Okay, right, that's controversial. Right, I please do not send in any comments or cancel us from podcast because of Gary's last statement. But anyway, yeah, ever since, you kind of got all of the Irish players out of the Premier League, has the Premier League progressed? Obviously, I would say no. But I'm going to go for Holland only because next door neighbours to Germany. Yeah. And when the Orange Army travel in numbers, wow, it's a sight to behold. And, maybe it's not like a vintage team, but they've got some great players. So I'm going to go for Holland, and I think it'll be a Holland-Germany final. And boy, if that's possible, I haven't even worked out whether that's possible or not, but if it is possible, that would just be off the charts. I think it would be off the charts even more than if England got to a final, but who knows?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah. So neither of those teams, like none of these teams are going to get anywhere close to winning it, are they?
Obviously not. Probably at least one of them is going to crash out in the group stage, and then it'll be the story of the tournament, won't it? But
who are you going for an outsider then? So Holland are favourites, did you say?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with Italy just to kind of sneak in there. I know they're not particularly an outsider. Don't get me wrong.
Surely, I'll give you Holland is your outsider, and Italy is your favourites. Let's go with that one.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Switch it up. All right. Cool. There we are. Listen, first, I'm sure we're going to do probably a few on the Euros, but yeah, fascinating to see that. We'll look out for Bellingham. We'll look out for all of our friends who are competing in this tournament and see how they go on. We wish them all well. And hopefully we're going to speak to a few people who are actually out of the tournament doing different bits and pieces. So no promises, but watch this space for the next Breaking Line series at the Euros.
Look forward to it, Dave.